Exclusive unveiling of the unknown comic, plus a beer-drinking dog, belly dancing lessons, a hotel for your love fantasies, and the return of the potty-trained cat on Real People. Then Drummond's stuck on Arnold's teacher, and Arnold goes from teacher's pet to class pest. And when the music teacher dies in the Alder home, Ruthie takes it personally.
I killed him!
Then it's a crazy look at family life.
And you're the living proof of that.
On the best of Saturday Night Live, it all starts at 8, 7 Central and Mountain. Friday.
I want that fourth carrier.
Charlton Heston and Henry Fonda had an all-star cast in The Battle of Midway, a special 3-hour movie Friday.
From NBC News, we now join our regularly scheduled programming in progress.
And even though this one is considerably more serious, it seems appropriate, literally on the eve of the dreaded year 1984, to look at a case of computers displacing men. There were 3 battlefields in this 1964 war, the 3 Toronto daily newspapers, where the publishers were determined to start setting type by using computers instead of men. Larry Zolf, then a regular contributor to the series This Hour Has 7 Days, wrote and directed a compelling documentary about the issues in that ill-fated strike. Before we show you this program, we thought you should meet again this probing, irreverent journalist, Larry Zolf. Today, this building houses the Globe and Mail, but back in the summer of 1964, it was the home of the Telegram and the scene of picketing and some disturbance, as were the plants of the 2 other Toronto dailies. It turned out to be a long and bitter strike, and Larry Zolf covered it fully to prepare his program, Strike, Men Against Computers. Larry, 19 years ago, in weather sometimes like this, you spent a lot of time across the street covering this strike. Must bring back mixed memories for you.
Well, it does. To begin with, it was the very first thing I ever did that you could call journalistic or whatever. Prior to that, I was interviewing baby pandas and hippopotamuses and whatever Doug Letterman and 7 Days Gang could throw my way. It was a lovely story because I had stool pigeons inside, and I had worked with the union that was at strike, the ITU, for many years before in my previous job in the labor movement. The reporters were friends of mine. I was intensely interested in it, and I sold it to Letterman on the basis of 2 things. It was Men Against Computers, automation, the first major strike in automation in Canada, and secondly, it was a strike which involved Colorado Springs, or the Americans telling the boys here in Toronto what they could or could not do. 2 issues that are still with us, really.
How did you sell it to the union? Because you seem to get sort of carte blanche treatment. Even in some of the meetings I noticed, no other press was allowed, but you were allowed in.
Well, I'm an old con artist. I work on this premise. I do one side first, and I immerse myself totally like a method actor, like Stanislavski or Rod Steiger, if I'm not being too facetious. And I believe in solidarity forever. I eat only in Russian communist restaurants. I watch only Eisenstein movies. I don't talk to anyone who has more money than me, and those who are less money than me who are supporting the Liberal Party or the Tory Party. And I worked myself up into a froth and kept seeing things from their point of view. And I had myself a great communist movie. I mean, really. But I knew I could never get it on the network unless I had balanced it out. And the only way to balance it out was to switch, was to have lunch at Winston's and to dine out with the big shots like Mr. Hondrick, et cetera, et cetera. I'm being a little facetious, but working particularly with the public relations guys and the lawyers for management side. And I said, look, I'm not going to do a communist movie.
I worked at the Telegram in those days, and I was in the Guild. We did cross the line. How much difference would it have made if we hadn't, do you think?
Overwhelming. The difference would have been overwhelming, but the Guild would then have been involved in an illegal strike with bitterness of all kinds, fines. The management would have nailed the Guild far heavier than the ITU, but it would have crippled the papers for at least 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever. There would have been massive consumer resistance, and maybe this would have come out with a settlement that would have favored the labor side a little more.
But that would still only have been a temporary solution because the end was inevitable, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. The equipment that the ITU was fighting there, forget it, they lost that completely. They were fighting it here, and Colorado Springs was fighting it in Toronto because they did not want to fight in New York, where the big newspapers are, and we were used as a guinea pig. But technology just goes and goes and goes. We're going to have a screen where you'll be able to press a button, and your columnist will step into the living room of your own home and tell you what he thinks that day. You won't even have to buy a paper.
Here we are 19 years later. You covered a story then that was called Strike, Man Against Computers. How far have we progressed, if that's the word, since then?
Well, we haven't progressed at all. I mean, it's silly to talk. I mean, sure, these printers were heavy-handed, and they lost a lot of public sympathy, and they weren't too nice in certain situations that border on violence. But the issue has not been tackled by anybody. We're just blithely going on. We've got computers doing everything now. You can marry a computer now and just live with a computer and punch up the information, get a simulated sex experience. I mean, it is crazy. And if we don't come to grips with it, we're going to have more strikes and more chaos and certainly much more unemployment, 12% as we have now. In 1966, when that strike was done, 4% was considered outrageous. 6% was hoo-ha. I mean, so what the hell are we, what are we playing with? Dangerous things, I would say.
Here now, from March 28, 1965, is Larry Zolf's documentary, Strike, Men Against Computers, first shown on This Hour Has 7 Days. Strike, Men Against Computers, first seen on This Hour Has 7 Days on March 28, 1965. And our thanks to Larry Zolf for joining us to talk about the making of that documentary. Now, back to lighter thoughts on this last day before we enter the age of Orwell. 20 years ago, the series Parade featured a year-end review of the music of 1963. The program was hosted by Elaine Bedar and Fred Davis. Featured were Don Franks, Denny Vaughan, the Hamilton Singers, Billy Vann, and others. When I screened the program recently, I found it contained one surprise, for me at least. I won't tell you about it until later. Here's Parade.